12%, £1,000 off, £500 cashback, £2,500 cashback, free insurance, etc., is just confusing the issue. I think what we need is clarity.
When will the motor industry learn that consumers are far too sophisticated to play these silly games? They don't want special editions, special offers, and things that just confuse the market. What they want is clear, transparent, honest prices, and they're not the only ones. Some car dealers out there are sweating so much that they're saying to the manufacturers they must reduce their prices soon, or some of them will not be there next year.
Even one of the biggest car dealers in the country is worried. Peter Vardy, whose group sells 150,000 cars a year, is angry.
I wrote to our manufacturer partners because we work closely with them. You know, as manufacturers and retailers, it is a partnership. And put my suggestion that prices should be realigned and probably reduced by 10 to 12% from January the 1st next year. I suggested that it was announced in December so that the year could get off to a good start. There is plenty of indecision at the moment. Customers are voting with their feet and delaying their purchase decision because of all the publicity that they read and hear. The manufacturers must now act.
But the motor moguls aren't for turning. Ford's response was blunt. We've got no plans to reduce prices at this stage. Vauxhall also remained adamant. Our position hasn't changed. Our vehicles are extremely competitively priced. And Rover 2 refused to budge. We've taken action to ensure we're ahead of the game, but have no plans to reduce prices.
The fact that consumers are deserting UK showrooms by the thousand must send the manufacturers a clear and very obvious message. And that is that to restore consumer confidence and to restore logic and sanity to a market which is close to anarchy, the only thing that's to be done is to follow Mitsubishi's lead and reduce list prices as soon as possible.
Back to our lunatic notion of buying soft-top cars in the middle of winter. Now, if these two are a little rich for you, £7 for the Saab, 6 for the BMW, here's one you maybe won't have thought of, and it's half the price of the other two. I give you the Peugeot 205 Cabriolet. The Peugeot 205 used to be a little 80s icon, and the most desirable of the lot was the convertible, either the CTI or this CJ. You get Peugeot's peerless handling, Pininfarina designer looks, and exclusivity, because very few convertibles were ever sold. They were just too expensive. The downside to the 205 is that they feel very tinny and insubstantial. They won't die, but they get increasingly decrepit, so shop carefully.
Look for lots of oil leaks, an engine that sounds like a pair of castanets, billowing blue smoke from high milers, blowing head gaskets, and make sure the cam belt's been changed recently. Most were bought by suburban mummies and tend to be better looked after than their hatchback counterparts. Early G-Plate 205 convertibles are down to a couple of grand now, but if you want a drop top that's much better screwed together, you'll need to go to Wolfsburg. You'll need a Golf convertible.
And these have also taken a big hit in the price guides over the last 6 months. In fact, only 2 weeks ago, I sold a very pretty D-Reg Golf Cabriolet for just 2,000 quid. This is an F-Reg 89, done 123,000 miles. It's been around the world. Could be sitting in your driveway for just 3,000 quid. Cheap car.
They'll easily do 200,000, but watch that hood. A new one is £700 territory. Mind you, it'll do 30 to the gallon and cost around £150 to service.
Downsides, well, it's a bit austere, a bit gloomy. The standard spec's a bit mean. You've got these funny floppy things to wind your windows down, and there's no power steering, so it's a bit heavy on the hands. But it still looks very good. It's that classic Carmen shape, and it's still got buckets and buckets of street cred.
And don't expect any serious mechanical nasties, apart from the odd CV joint clicking and worn shockers. GTIs are hard to insure at Group 15, but the 1.8 Clipper convertible weighs in at only Group 13. And prices are withering. You could buy an early smart A-Reg for as little as £1,500, or a last-of-the-line K-Plater with leather for just £7,500.
So, are these cute cabrios the best bargains around this winter?
Not quite. Stay with us and we'll be showing you the real steel in out-of-season ragtops.
Still to come on Top Gear, Tiff drives the original Nutter's hatch, the Sunbeam Lotus. And festive treats for you and your motor.
But before all that, time for another JD Power appeal. Firstly, thanks to the thousands of you who have already responded to our request for help with this year's Top Gear JD Power survey. The only survey that tells us what it's really like living with your car, and the only survey that the manufacturers do take notice of. But to make this year's our most comprehensive ever, we still need your help. We're looking for R-registered cars. That's any car registered between August the 1st, 97 and July 31st, 98. So if your motor appears on this list, pick up that phone and call this number. 0800 99 1111. That's 0800 99 1111. It won't cost you a penny, and I promise it will make a difference. And don't worry, we'll be flagging up that number again at the end of the show.
Earlier in the programme, we saw Vicky having some fun in the latest 172 horsepower Clio. But then nothing's ever really that new, because 20 years ago, this Talbot Sunbeam had 155 horsepower under the bonnet, thanks to a 2.2 litre twin-cam Lotus engine straight out of the Esprit. But the big difference between now and then is that this little hot hatch is rear-wheel drive. And that made it possible for Lotus to up the power to 234 bhp and in 1980 go out and break the Ford Escort's 8-year domination of the RAC Rally of Great Britain. You can have a lot of fun with front-wheel drive, but as soon as you've got more than 200 horsepower, poor little front wheels have a bit of a problem doing both the steering and the accelerating. You see, with rear-wheel drive, you can do the first bit of steering with the steering, and the next bit with the throttle. Just the Lotus engine that went in, because there's also a ZF gearbox, and it's got the racing layout with first on the dog leg, so that once you're moving, you've just got the 4 gears in an H pattern. It's got very stiff suspension, but it turns in with mild understeer, and then as that power comes firing in, oversteer is available. The Talbot Sunbeam actually started life as a Chrysler Sunbeam, which the American giant who had bought the Roots Group in 1967 built to replace the Hillman Imp. It was, quite simply, a shortened Hillman Avenger, and it was Chrysler who had the idea of sticking the Lotus engine in and improving their image by going rallying. But Peugeot bought the company in 1978, dug out their old Talbot badge and claimed all the glory. If you can find one that hasn't rusted away, for just a few £1,000s, you can still have a fun competition car to go sprinting in at weekends. Brilliant! Sorry, Vix, until I can get my hands on that mid-engined rear-wheel drive Clio sometime towards the end of next year, I'm sticking with this.
In Britain, the tin box is small, functional, and used to store biscuits and cakes. In France, they add wheels to theirs, make them bigger, et voila, the basis of the whole motoring culture. Since the Citroen 2CV and Renault 4 went to that great scrapyard in the sky, both companies are now trying to reclaim some of that tin box territory. Mesdames et messieurs, the Renault Kangoo et Citroen Berlingo. Now, let's not be coy here. These things are based on vans. But the French, the people who took the 2CV to their hearts, think these bizarre cars are a really good idea. So much so that they're now sending them over here. What are they putting in their baguettes these days? If you think that the outside of this car is slightly strange, then the inside complements it well. To disguise the fact that this is a van ordinaire, Citroen has stuck in some rather tasteful upholstery and colour-coded the dials. But despite those valiant efforts, this car won't be bought because of its styling. You do get a choice of 3 engines though, including a diesel. This entry-level 1.4-litre petrol is zippy enough once you've wound the revs up into a frenzy, and despite its van underpinnings, it handles in a tidy fashion. But people won't buy this car because of its performance. What people will buy this car for, though, is space. It's got gallons of it. You could even drive along wearing an enormous hat, like people aren't going to stare at you anyway. It's also got one of the biggest sunroofs I've ever seen. But maybe Citroen designed this as another way to get into the car because there are no side doors, possibly limiting the use of all that space. Which is where the Renault comes into its own, because when converting this into a car, Kangoo was given 2 sliding doors for the backseat passengers. Smart move, my little French chums. The Kangoo has just 2 engines, a 1.4-litre petrol and a 1.9 diesel. This unleaded version matches the Citroen's performance, hitting 60 miles an hour in around 14.5 seconds. But the Renault is more agile when it comes to handling, though it doesn't give as much comfort to passengers. Inside, the Kangoo is more van-like than the Berlingo, with plenty of exposed metalwork. There are no floor coverings or fancy seat fabrics, but there is, quelle surprise, an awful lot of space. The 2 cars have power steering, a driver's airbag and lots of storage places, with a small options list that includes ABS on both and a CD player with the Kangoo. Obviously, these little creature comforts won't lure anyone into the showrooms, but their prices will. The Renault can be in your garage for a little under £10,000, topping out at 10.5, whereas the Citroen starts at just under 11 and peaks at 11,400. For my money, I'd like to spend the extra and have a more civilised drive with the Berlingo, but the Kangoo is much more practical thanks to those sliding back doors, and it's also cheaper. Obviously, this French pair are trying to emulate the practicality of cars like the highly innovative Renault Scenic. And although they are more spacious, there are fewer seats. They do work well, though, if you need a van in the week and a car at the weekend. Just make sure you drive somewhere where your mates can't take the mickey.
Now is the time for giving, so this year, give your motor a Christmas to remember. Say sorry for those shortcuts that weren't with a satellite navigation system. It'll direct you straight to your destination or show you things like where the nearest petrol station is. These systems start from around £1,850, but there are cheaper alternatives from about £1,000. Beat the jams with a traffic master on your dashboard.
Very slow traffic for 4 miles.
It warns you of motorway queues 10 miles before you reach them. Batteries not included. So stop your car getting hot and bothered for around £80. Less of a stocking filler than a boot filler. This fridge runs off the cigarette lighter and keeps things hot or cold, so make sure you switch it the right way. Keep your turkey sandwiches fresh for a cool £90. Save your seats with a curry safe. Corner like tiff and keep the takeaway intact for £1. If the turkey doesn't even fit inside the boot, never mind the oven, an inflatable roof rack will save Christmas dinner, and there's no need to keep the receipt. One size fits all. Give Santa's sleigh a run for its money for £50. Have a television installed so the car doesn't miss out on Christmas classics like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Herbie. For £950, you can keep your car up all night. Put a twinkle in your car's eye with super bright bulbs. No need to eat carrots to see in the dark, but we just need an excuse for the sprouts now. Xenon bulbs shine for £10 each. And finally, remember, a car is for the wife, not just for Christmas. Kiss farewell to scraped bumpers forever with a reversing aid which beeps as you get closer to an obstacle, so you can stop before... Save your bumpers for £123. So with all those goodies out there, there's no need to rely on the old standbys, like socks.
It's the final act of our soft-top drama, Cheap Convertibles, and whereas these members of the cast have proved themselves to be fantastic value, we've saved you one for the finale, the car that we believe to be the best value, the most reliable and the most disarming. It's this.
In the 9 years since its launch, the MX-5 has been rightly greeted with all the superlatives going. This is one sports car you don't have to suffer to own.
Now here's the story with MX-5s. At the moment they are undervalued, and I'll tell you why. For years and years and years they used to fetch top dollar, massively, massively overbook. But over the last couple of years, literally boatloads of them have been imported from Japan, what they call the UNOS Roadster over there. These are grey imports, and the result is the market is clogged. It is stiff with unsold MX-5s. Now, prices have hit the linoleum. You can buy some grey import roadsters for around $3.5 grand, but a proper G-Reg, UK-supplied MX-5 is down to as little as $5 grand.
Of all our soft tops, the MX-5 is the easiest to own. Reckon on £100 a go servicing, 35 to the gallon, and Group 12 insurance.
So when it comes to coothy little sports cars, this one is absolutely one of the best. As usual, the Japanese take a good idea, the old Lotus Elan, and make it better, the MX-5.
But a word of warning. Don't be seduced by one of those alluringly cheap Japanese imports. You won't know where it's been, whether the mileage is genuine, or if it's been wrapped around a bus shelter in Nagasaki. Plus, when you come to sell your grey import, it won't have held its value nearly as well as a proper UK-supplied MX-5 with a dealer history.
So it's your call, as we never tire of telling you there really is no better time to buy an out-of-season convertible.
Next week, we'll be celebrating 21 years of Top Gear, charting the highs and lows of the world's most watched motoring programme.
Facing tough competition from abroad, will he crack up? The Pottery chief executive goes back to the floor, next on BBC Two. From styling to performance, a selection of the latest small sports cars are put to the test in the January issue of BBC Top Gear magazine.